Hello everybody, my name is Giovanni Dimitrikopoulos. Today I'll be presenting on pirates, democracy, rebellion, and the making of New South. And this is going to be focusing on English piracy. There is many piracy around the golden age of piracy that is going on, but I'm going to be focusing mainly on English piracy. This topic expands beyond our course materials by exploring how the English maritime world produced one of history's most unusual political experiments, a society built by outlaws who practiced democracy at sea. How did all this piracy start? English piracy began long before the Golden Age. In 1540s, English captains were encouraged by the crown to attack Spanish ships, such as merchant ships, treasure fleet, or any ship that they could get their hands on. These early pirates were often state-sanctioned privateers, blurring the line between patriotism and crime. Women also played an important role as partners, traders, and sometimes even participants in these raids, showing that piracy, which is sometimes misleading by our views on the world and just on fiction, that it was a male dominated world. There was also many female pirates that helped allow piracy to get so big. These early raids helped expand England's maritime power and laid the foundation for later pirate culture. Now, what the transition from state-sanctioned piracy to independent piracy by the late 1600s, early everything changed when major European wars have ended and the use of privateers were no longer needed to harass the enemies of the crown. Thousands of sailors were unemployed without pay or commission. And many of these privateers were like, I was making good money and I'm very good at this, and I don't want to go back to how things were because many of them turned to piracy as a way to survive, also to resist harsh naval discipline. Because on merchant ships and on even on crown sanctioned vessels, the discipline was a lot worse than what was on the privateers vessels. Figures like Henry Morgan and William Kidd emerged representing shifts from government-backed raiding to independent, self-directed piracy. This transformation marked the beginning of piracy as a social rebellion rather than a state enterprise. One of the sources I used was Under the Banner of the King's Death by Marcus Redkin. And I put this slide in due to the fact of what he argues. He argues that pirates were maritime workers rebelling against exploitation, and these weren't just mere criminals. Pirates' ships functioned as floating democracies. Crews elected captains, shared plunder, and made collective decision making. They even had constitutions that dictated a lot what they were doing. Piracy, it was a as regular seas piracy as a form of resistance to empires and capitalism, connecting directly late to the later pirate republic of New South. The pirate republic of New South, Bahamas. After the War of Spain's secession, 1716 to 1720, many privateers lost their legal status and settled in New South, creating what became known as the Republic of Pirates. This community operated with democratic principles. Leaders were elected and decisions were made collectively. Famous figures like Blackbeard, Charles Vance, and Benjamin Hornigold, which I gotta say is probably one of the most pirate sounding names ever, helped shape this short lived republic. Though all good things gotta come to the end, and eventually Britain sent Governor Woodes Rogers to restore order, ending this experiment in pirate self-rule. New Style Breeze Resistance shows how democratic practices developed at sea, such as the pirates' constitution and how they elect their leaders at sea, could be transferred to land. Now, recently I listened to the Pirates History podcast, and the episode 27 Wickedness gave me great insight on what some of this the ending of distinct sanctioned piracy looked like. The podcast episode Wickedness focused on Henry Morgan world in 1660. It painted Port Royal as a wild, wickedest city in English America, full of wealth, vice, and moral contraction. The story of Mary Clarton shows the human side of this chaos in the podcast, while the discussion of New Providence Island foreshadowed the Bahamas' later role as a pirate haven. The episode also connects Morgan's actions to the European politics, showing how what was going on at the time with France and Spain and elsewhere in the old world, and the wars that were starting to be come back up shaped how the new world piracy, such as they got a new warship sent to Morgan and the governor by the crown and for defense of the island, and Morgan the governor saw this as they wanted them to attack the Spanish treasure fleets and disrupt as what they have been doing. And while also not what the crown wanted them to do, they wanted to be on the defensive on this, while also having that same ship, because this was a war with France at the time. They they captured one of the French ships that were a privateer under Captain Morgan and tried them for piracy, which kind of shows what's going on in the old world affects just as much the new world piracy. This link between the Empire and the Rebellion is central to understand how piracy evolved. Now, the comparison between Port Royal and Pirate Republic, both Wickedness and the Republic of Pirates explore how piracy grew out of instability, but they represent different stages of this. Morgan's World and Port Royal shows the origin of piracy, still tied to empires privateering, while New South shows the mature expression of piracy, an independent democratic society rejecting imperial control. Port Royal's corruption and New South self-government, though, are two sides of the same coin. Both reveal how European politics and colonial greed created space for these rebellions. Now, what are some of these key takeaways? To summarize, English piracy evolved from originally an imperial tool to hurt their enemies to a social rebellion. These European wars and economic hardships fueled the rise of piracy. Pirates created alternative society to challenge these hierarchies, these issues that they were dealing with on the merchant ships and the naval vessels of the imperial crowns. New Sal's Republic and Port Royal's chaos both reveal how the wickedness of these empires created something new and what these empires saw as dangerous. Historians like Lesson and Redrick help us see pirates not as villains, but as workers seeking freedom and equality. Together, these stories show that piracy was deeply connected to global politics and the human desire for politics. So, in conclusion, English piracy evolved over nearly 2 centuries, shaped by war, economics, and resistance to empire. The Pirate Republic of New South stands as a powerful example of how marginalized sailors created their own society in defiance of the imperial authority. This topic expands our understanding of civilization by showing how alternative communities can emerge from instability, conflict, and the pursuit of freedom. Again, thank you for listening to my presentation. If you are curious on what sources I use for this presentation, here are them. I use four main ones, and they're all right here. I do again. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and have a wonderful day.